Welcome to Section B, Engaging and Interacting with Students Online. I'm Helen Graves, an instructional designer with the cvc-oei, which stands for California Virtual College Online Education Initiative. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about how Section B of the OEI Course Design Rubric supports you in meeting guidelines for interaction and regular effective contact in your online courses. There we go. Live captions are available. Thank you to Lenore, our captioner. In order to access them, you can use the CC icon in the Zoom menu bar. Zoom also does have a chat feature. You're going to find that in the Zoom menu, and when you click it, you'll see a pop-up window come up, and you can just type your comments where it says type message here. And then when you hit return, it will display your message for everyone to see. I do want to mention that today's topic is Section B of the rubric. There is a lot to learn about Canvas, about Zoom, about online pedagogy, and you may well have lots of questions about all of that. For today, I'm going to ask that we try to stay focused on our topic of Section B and online interaction. If other questions come up in chat, Cheryl or Sean may have a resource they can share with you, but I'm really going to be mostly directing my attention to questions that are about our topic, just so we can make sure to cover everything that we want to cover. So Section B of the OEI Course Design Rubric is all about interaction, both instructor-to-student and student-to-student. The California Educational Code refers to it as regular effective contact, and the feds call it regular substantive interaction. So you may see both initials, REC and RSI. In either case, Section B of the Course Design Rubric has got you covered. But why is interaction in an online course? Well, procedurally, it's important because of the regulatory distinction between a correspondence course and a distance education or online course. And that distinction is interaction. By Ed Code, online courses are to be the virtual equivalent of face-to-face courses, which therefore allows them to qualify for financial aid and apportionment, as well as being eligible in articulation for students to subsequent four-year college enrollment. So what that really means is a correspondence course isn't going to cut it. Additionally, a recent change to Title V requires that not only instructors interact with their students, but they also include regular opportunities for student-to-student interaction, as well as the instructor-to-student. Something else to be aware of procedurally is that for regular effective contact, the state distance education guidelines say districts and/or colleges will need to define effective contact, including how often and in what manner instructor-to-student interaction and student-to-student interaction is achieved through collegial consultation with the district or college's academic senate. Now that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is you're going to want to proactively check in with your campus DE coordinator or look on your college website to determine what your campus's regular effective contact guidelines are, because they're going to vary from campus to a certain degree. But even beyond regulatory guidelines, I think a more important reason to include interaction in your online courses is the common thread that runs consistently through research studies showing that interaction is a vital element in the instructional process, whether it's face-to-face or online. And I think any instructor worth their salt knows that intuitively. Now, it may be true that model students, the ones who are self-directed, highly motivated, technically savvy, they maybe don't need a whole lot of instructor presence to be successful in an online course. Most of us are aware that many of our college students don't really fall into that category. They don't yet have the necessary knowledge, skills, or attitudes to be successful in an online environment without that additional level of structured support that regular interaction with the instructor and with their classmates can provide. The question before us today is how to do that effectively. And that's where the OEI Course Design Rubric can help by laying out what is essentially a step-by-step set of guidelines to follow. There we go. There are 6 elements in section B, all of them dealing with aspects of interaction and regular effective contact. What I'd like to do today is go over each one to offer clarification, provide specific examples of how that particular element can be implemented in your course. So let's get started. Item B1 is called pre-course contact, and the aligned definition says that the instructor initiates contact prior to or at the beginning of the course. Now, what does that mean? Basically, you're going to send a pre-course welcome message. We recommend doing that via email, typically, rather than through Canvas, since not all students, the new ones in particular, may not have confirmed their Canvas account yet, and so they won't be receiving notifications and inbox messages from within Canvas. What should your pre-course welcome include? Well, at a minimum, it should include a friendly welcoming statement, Canvas login details, tech and/or distance education support information, and anything else you feel is important that they know before they start the class without overwhelming them. So that might be textbook information, the title, where to buy it. It might be week 1 requirements, those kinds of things. I want to show you an example of a couple of pre-course messages. And let me make my screen a little bigger. Not that I expect you to read the whole thing now, but just so we can see it. And this information is in a course shell that I'm going to share with you at the end when we talk about resources. So don't worry about trying to find where this is. I'm definitely going to share it with you later. So this talks about the purpose of pre-course, and then it gives you an example of a really short one, and then it gives you another example of a longer one, a little more fleshed out, some more details, got a nice bullet list, et cetera, et cetera. So there's no single way of doing it, but you want to be sure you're including the information that they need. However, with the caveat that I want to caution you not to make this message as long as your syllabus. This really is intended to be welcoming, to engage your students and get them excited to start in the course. If you send them a lengthy tome that takes 10 minutes to read through, probably going to have the opposite effect. So let's go on to B2. And that is what's called regular effective contact. Don't let it confuse you with the whole idea of regular effective contact. In the rubric context, what we mean is the course design includes regular instructor-initiated contact with the students using the Canvas communication tools, and a clear explanation for students of when and how communication will happen. Educational researcher Joseph McClary noted that high-quality online education requires instructors to engage with students on an individual level rather than just providing oversight as students move through the course. And so what B2 is looking for in particular is an explanation for students of how and when you're going to be communicating and interacting with them in terms of discussions, announcements, feedbacks. What can they expect from you? This can be in your syllabus, or I think an even better method is to create a separate page in your orientation or getting started module. You've got one of those, right? And so again, I want to show you an example of what we're talking about. This is a very comprehensive example of what could be called your communication page, or how we'll connect, whatever you want to title it. And then it includes all the different ways you might be communicating with your students throughout the term. If you're not doing a particular way, so maybe you're not doing weekly video check-ins, you can just delete that particular section from your page. As I said, I'll be sharing these resources with you. I wanted to point out some of them, like this one, gives you the example of what it looks like, and then it also includes the actual HTML code. So you can just copy and paste all of this code, plop it on a page in your course, and then go and edit the parts that will customize it for your students. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to fulfill what the rubric is asking you to do. So that's B2, the regular effective contact. Moving on to B3, and I will stop for questions, I promise. I just want to get through a little bit of this first, and then you'll have questions to ask. So B3 is about student-initiated contact with the instructor. And the aligned definition says that students are encouraged to initiate contact with the instructor through easily accessed contact information that includes expected response times. The asynchronicity of an online course means that students might be active in the course shell any time of day. Does this mean you have to be available to your students 24/7? No, absolutely not. Does it mean students should be crystal clear about when you are available, how you prefer to be contacted, and how quickly you're going to respond to their inquiries? Yes, it absolutely does. So you're going to want to include, ideally in multiple places in your course, details about how to contact you. So what are the various ways that students can, the methods they can use to get in touch with you? So might be college email, the Canvas inbox, your office hours, web conferencing on Zoom, phone or text messaging if you're an instructor that does that. There might be a Q&A discussion in the course. You know, there's all kinds of ways that students can be encouraged to get in touch with you, but they won't necessarily know them. So you want to make it clear to them. You also want to make it clear what's your preferred contact message. You may have one way you want them to contact you if they have questions about the class or about the course content, and another way if they have a personal question. And you also want to be sure and let them know your response time. How long will it take to get a reply? You may want to indicate something like, if you don't hear back from me in 24 hours, assume I didn't get your email and please resend it. It's a really good way to sort of build in a protection in case there's an email malfunction. Because the last thing you want to have happen is a student to be sitting there waiting for a reply from you when you never even got the email. To encourage student-initiated interaction, your contact information, as I mentioned, should be easy to find and ideally in multiple places. So on the homepage, in the syllabus, in your orientation module, wherever else it makes sense to you, and have that expected response times. And another thing to think about is some students are going to be reluctant to contact the instructor for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're shy, maybe they've had bad experiences with less than compassionate teachers, maybe there are cultural differences going on. So I always recommend including some kind of verbiage that specifically invites students to contact you. Something as simple as, I care about your success and I'm looking forward to answering your questions, can really make a big difference for those kind of shy, reluctant students. I even worked with one instructor when in the course review work I'm doing, where he told me what he does is in the first week or two, he basically has all of his students set up a 10-minute Zoom session with him individually. And he lays out a little meeting schedule so they can pick a time that works for them. And it's just a very informal, howdy-doody kind of session where he just wants to introduce himself. He asks them some, easy questions, finds out about their major, what are their interests, etc., just to break the ice in a very informal, individual way. And what he said is he has found since he started doing that, students are much more likely to get in touch with him when they have a question or an issue or something they need to talk about. And he really feels it makes a difference to have that connection in the first week or two, just real informal, low key, makes it so much more likely they're going to get in touch when they really do need help, if they do later in the semester. All right, so what I want to do is stop maybe 5 minutes or so and find out if you have any questions about B1 through 3. And the way we'll work it, if you've got a question, use the raise hand feature so that we know, and then I'll go ahead and unmute you so you can ask your question. And also in the meantime, I'll check with Cheryl or Sean, has there been anything in chat that I should address?
There's one so far that wasn't about resources, and it was from Tamara. If we are repeating these instructions on communications on multiple pages in Canvas, how are we supposed to keep things short and to the point? It seems that repetition everywhere doesn't necessarily work. Okay,
great question. And the reason we recommend multiple places for really important information like your contact details and tech support and that kind of stuff is because everybody's brain works differently. And so the place you think to put it that makes perfect sense to you, and of course I would look there if I were wanting this piece of information, is not going to be the place that all of your students are going to think to look. And so, yes, it might be in your syllabus. Another issue with only having it in the syllabus is typically syllabi are very long documents. And when a student needs to go find something, they have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll in order to find that thing they're looking for. So by having it in multiple places, it ensures that it's easy for students to get to. And if a student doesn't think to go to a page called resources, they don't think, oh, that's where I'm going to find my instructor contact information. It's also on the home page, it's in the syllabus, it's in wherever else. So hopefully that makes sense, Tamara, or Tamara, I'm not sure how you say it, that why the reasoning behind having it in multiple places is not to complicate things, but actually because we all think in different ways, and it just makes it more likely that a student who thinks differently from your pathway is going to be able to find the information.
Yeah, June said it was a little confusing too, but like Helen said, people are different. One more question from Kathy. Can you clarify the instruction for students to verify their email with Canvas? Is that just checking their profile and setting to be sure that their email is correct?
Okay, and Cheryl and Sean, correct me. It used to be in Canvas, like every other platform, is quickly changing things these days, but it used to be when a student was brand new in Canvas, they needed to actually, and I don't remember if it was going into profile or not, but they needed to confirm that the email that Canvas had for them was correct before they were officially going to be getting notifications and inbox messages and things. And Cheryl, do you know if that's still the case?
Just about, yeah. In notifications where your profile is, in profile for notifications, you just want to check your email to make sure that you know which one it's going to come to. And, but I don't think you have to verify anymore. You just have to check it and then make sure that your notifications are on.
Okay. And so one way of dealing with that is to get the student guide about checking notifications and customizing notifications and including that perhaps in your welcome message so that a student who is new to Canvas and maybe hasn't checked to make sure the right email is the one that Canvas has, they know how to find that information.
And then
so
the last
that
one,
answered your question.
The last one, right now, this is from Royce, we are dealing with technology equity since everyone's online. Does CVC address that part of the rubric?
In a short answer, not specifically. So as you're attending these webinars, you may see things that you recognize are addressing or at least attempting to address equity. And there is an equity rubric that Peralta College spearheaded and developed. It hasn't been woven into this particular OEI rubric, but it is another one. I don't know, however, I'm not sure how much technology equity was addressed in the Peralta rubric, but if you Googled Peralta Equity Rubric, you would be able to check and see and maybe use that as a resource, Royce.
It looks like there's another one from Edward. Please explain more about the weekly video check-in.
Okay, it's just something some instructors do as part of their way of humanizing and creating instructor presence in the course, rather than just have an announcement or an overview page in Canvas saying, here's what we're going to do this week. They create a short little 60-second, 2-minute, whatever video saying, hey, welcome to week 3. Here's what our objectives are. Here's what you're going to be doing. I got a great resource for you, whatever it is. So it's just a kind of a check-in that the instructor records and posts for the students each week. It's not a requirement. It's just something that some people do. And so that's why I had included it as one of the ways of communicating with students on that communication page.
Okay, thanks, Sean, for posting the Peralta rubric.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Sean. Okay,
Okay,
I'm going to stop right now, and I want to go on, and then we're going to have more time for questions.
Okay.
So thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate you facilitating that for me. All right, moving on to B4, student-initiated contact with other students. And so this rubric item is referring to what you might call unstructured or informal opportunities for student interaction. With asynchronous learning, there really is no before or after class when a lot of that kind of community building often occurs. You know, you're walking by somebody's desk and you say, hey, you know, did you catch the game last night or whatever it is? Oh, Sean's going to get mad at me because they're not doing games and he's very upset. But anyhow, sorry, didn't mean to bring up a painful memory, Sean. Anyhow, in an online course, because students aren't interacting in the classroom and passing each other in the hallway and et cetera, you have to consciously build in opportunities for those outside spaces that are free from content delivery and assessment and the formal aspects of the course. So this rubric item is having you think about creating a water cooler or cafe discussion board where the class can just discuss whatever non-course related things, talk about current events, common interests, whatever it is they want within etiquette boundaries, of course. Another idea, you could create a social media page for the class where they can talk about things or share whatever. Another idea is perhaps to extol the virtues of creating a connection with even one other classmate and then set up study buddy or triad pairings or, you know, however that works. Just kind of finding ways for students who don't have the opportunity to be physically interacting with each other, finding ways that they can create a connection so that those off-the-cuff exchanges can happen without you having to always be structuring everything. I will say I'm in an online program and I'm also an extreme introvert, don't like connecting with people very much at all, but I also know, even as an introvert, it's really important to have somebody in the class that I can ask questions of, or, you know, hey, did you understand this homework? Or, hey, you know, whatever. And so what I found really helpful is in that first week or two, if the instructor does have some kind of way of letting us get to know each other, then I get a sense of, oh, I like the way that person thinks, or she seems nice, I'm going to ask her a question. And then it makes it more likely that I'm not going to feel isolated as I move through the course. So that's really the aim of this particular rubric item. The next one, 5, is similar, but I'm going to tell you how it's distinct. It's regular effective contact among students. And these are the structured interactions about course content. And so the aligned definition says, regular effective contact among students is designed and facilitated to build a sense of community among learners. So, as I said, it's the more formal graded opportunities to collaborate about the content itself. A word about discussions. Having worked with hundreds of instructors and courses, I can say from experience that the predominant view across our system is, I'll just throw a weekly discussion in my course and B5 is done. Danger, Will Robinson. There was a student panel at last year's online teaching conference with participants ranging from early 20s to mid 50s. And these California community college students were unanimous in reporting that the way most instructors handle online discussions is dreadful. The prompts were vague, unclear, or not open-ended, which meant that the discussion wasn't robust or meaningful, but the students had to participate. And so what these students were saying, they all said they wanted to interact with their classmates, but not in a way that felt like it was kind of a waste of time, simply so that the instructor could tick off a box, got student-to-student interaction handled. This is not to say discussions can't be a significant way to create student-to-student interaction around content. The takeaway is you want to be sure you're creating strong and engaging prompts. And you also want to keep in mind there are other ways to encourage interaction: group work, paired projects, peer review, other ideas. And at the end of the call, I'm going to be asking people to share your favorite ways of creating student-to-student interaction. So you may have an idea that I didn't even mention. We do have a Pocket PD guide on that has ideas for both B4 and B5. I'm going to put it in the chat, but I can't talk and do my mouse very well at the same time, so give me a second. Okay, here it is. That'll just be a resource for you after the call for ideas around B4 and B5. And our last rubric item is B6, and that's about participation levels. Students need to know what's expected of them in terms of participation, particularly in an asynchronous environment. So this is going to include details about discussion participation, both for the initial post and for replies to classmates, plus expectations for involvement in group projects or peer review assignments or whatever else. A well thought out rubric can really help with that. And I can hear some of you rolling your eyes at the thought of a rubric, but I'm going to tell you, both as an instructor and as a student, I love rubrics, especially in Canvas. The use of effectively written rubrics is really going to speed up your grading and give you more time to provide individualized feedback rather than repeating the same thing over and over again because students didn't understand something. And it also means an effectively written rubric is going to mean that your students are going to have a much clearer picture of what it is you want right from the get-go before they even start the assignment. So they're going to be much more likely to be fulfilling your expectations. And so in terms of participation, adding that criteria into a rubric is going to make a big difference. And I want to show you a couple of examples of an effectively written rubric, even though it's slightly off topic, I'll always say about it. So it will very specifically distinguish the grading criteria rather than lumping everything together and then just saying student met 4 of the 5 criteria. The student doesn't know which 4 of the 5 criteria they met or didn't meet. So when you break it out into individual criteria and then give them expectations on each one, that really helps. And do I want to say anything else about that? No, I don't think I do. What I'm also going to offer you is a resource on rubrics. I did a little bite-sized Canvas video about rubrics. I'm putting it in chat. It's just a quick 5-minute little screencast tutorial that may give you some ideas about effective rubrics. And another resource I want to share with you on group assignments is this one. Yeah, I agree, June. The Canvas rubric tool is so great. Sometimes people are reluctant, but once you convince them to try it, they usually are won over. Okay, so I put in those 2 resources. I also think in terms of participation levels, besides specific things like discussion posts and replies to peers and all that kind of stuff, I also think it's important to include any expectations you may have about participation in the course in general. So what do they need to do in the first week to stay enrolled? Make it clear to them. Do you have specific expectations in terms of ongoing weekly participation? Make it clear to them. What happens if they don't submit assignments for a particular length of time? You want to make it clear to them. We often forget that they don't know what college policies are or our own course policies. So you just want to make sure you're really spelling out what is expected of them. Okay, let's stop for questions again. It might be about B4 through B6, which we just talked about, or you may have something around one of the earlier ones. Again, if you want to unmute and ask your question, please use the raise hand feature and I will try to make note. Is there anything in the chat that I should answer? Sean?
So Janet had a question about interpreting B4. There's a consistent conversation around the interpretation, how to meet the standard. Some are just adding one sentence to a Q&A module that directs students to ask questions and then students can answer. The simple additional sentence, she thinks, does not meet B4. Your thoughts on that? So I know we've had discussions.
And part of the problem is the state and federal guidelines are somewhat ambiguous. And so as a system and also individual colleges, we're all trying to figure out what is the specific definition. What I would say around B4, the two pieces that I feel are important for a course to include in order to be aligned and to support student learning is to have those at least one opportunity where students can communicate and interact informally with each other. And then as the instructor, encourage them to use it. Don't force them to and don't require it, but just keep reminding them, hey, you've got this student lounge, you know, go find a buddy or go, you know, whatever it is that's appropriate for your course, your students, you know them better than I do. But so it's not just having it there and then it's there in discussion area, but students don't know about it. Just periodically throughout the course, reminding them, hey, there's this place you can go. Or, hey, if you want a study buddy, let me know. I've got a list of people that are looking for a study buddy and, you know, it'd be a great way for you to connect. So just kind of periodically letting them know that this informal communication is going to support their learning and you want to help them figure out how to make it happen. Hopefully that makes sense and adds to your understanding of B4. But I think what often doesn't happen is instructors will have that student lounge discussion, but then they never really make it clear to students when and how they should be using it, so students don't ever make those connections. Cheryl or Sean, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think you covered that one, Helen.
Okay.
But I do have another question from caller number 5.
All right.
Could you please provide some other alternatives to finishing a discussion with instructions to answer to 1 or 2 classmates? And Michelle posted something in the chat too about that, but I wanted to know what you thought.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you say it again? Maybe it just didn't.
Oh, like, could you provide alternatives to finishing a discussion with instructions to answer, you know, 1 or 2 of your classmates? So Michelle suggested maybe locate 2 peers who shared a unique perspective from your own, reply to those 2 students and summarize. So a different way of saying engage.
How to interact. Yeah, yeah. And I think Michelle's suggestion is excellent. Mm-hmm. I think to a large degree, it may depend on your discipline as to what's going to be an appropriate prompt for how you would like them to reply to or engage with another student. Mm-hmm. So I believe Canvas in discussions, you have the ability to turn on the like feature. So maybe one of your ways of recommending they interact is to like discussions, and then we'll vote on the one that gets the most likes, or whatever. Another, do I have this available? I may have to go find it. But another thing I'll do in my discussions is have a little bullet list teaching students how to reply to a peer, because they don't always know. And so saying, ask a question about their post, make a gentle correction to something they said in polite wording, provide a resource or something that enhances what that student said. So whatever ways make sense to you, that would, and actually another thought just came to mind. If you were in a discussion, what would be a fun way for you to want to interact with somebody? And maybe that's something you suggest to your students.
Very good.
And when we get to the suggestion part very shortly, somebody else may have an idea for what you do when you're encouraging students to reply to peers.
Absolutely. So then the next topic, I think, is groups. So someone asked, I can't see it right now, if you can use groups, and yes, you can. And Sylvia asked, any recommendations on the class size and when to split discussions into groups?
Yeah. There's no strict rule of thumb. You don't want to have the group so small that if you get a lackadaisical or less than participatory student or two, the group ends up being 1 or 2 people instead of the original 4 or 5 people. But you also don't want a group that's so big, it doesn't even end up feeling like it's a small group. So what you may want to do is experiment. Typically, I seem to find 7 or 8, and it would also depend on the activity. Some activities are structured in such a way that there's a particular role for 4 or 5 people, and so it makes sense to have a group of 4 or 5. But it really kind of depends on the activity and what you're having them do as to the group size. So I wouldn't want to say, Sylvia, a particular, just depends on the activity, and you want to be thinking not so small that it's, if somebody drops out, the group is, there's no group left, and not so big that it ends up still being a crowd rather than something, a place where they can really get to know each other.
Okay, I think we've got great suggestions in the chat too about other ways of grouping and discussing. So,
excellent. I always love to crowdsource this kind of stuff. So here's what I would like to do. I want to give you a chance to share your favorite interaction practices. But before we do, I want to make sure you also know about the final 2 webinars in the Course Design Rubric series. Section C, which is about assessing students in online courses, is happening next Friday, same time, June 5th. And yes, I have the registration link. Let me put that in chat. There we go. And then section D, Cheryl will be leading, and that is all about creating accessible content. And again, same time, 1 to 2 p.m., and that will be happening 2 weeks from today on June 12th. And I will put that registration link in the chat. The last thing I want to mention, if you teach biology labs or anything related to biology labs, there is a webinar right after this one called A Share Showcase, Teaching Online Science Labs for Biology. And let me put the registration link in the chat for that one. It is starting at 2 o'clock, so you may already have plans, but I figured just in case, and let me write bio lab. You might want to go to that one. And then a couple other resources, and then we'll open up. So I told you that, well, we're talking about the rubric. So if you would like to get the rubric, you can go to our website, which is onlinenetworkofeducators.org. And when you go there, on the Peer Online Course tab, there is a rubric option, and you can view it right online, or you can download it and have it on your computer. So that's the place to get the rubric. And in fact, I'll put this link in the chat. Chat is going to be full of links. And what I always recommend, everybody's, don't worry about trying to copy and paste. Just click the link in the chat. It'll open on your browser. And then after the call, you can go to the page and bookmark it if you want to, or explore it or whatever. So that's the easiest way to access links that are being put in the chat. The other thing I wanted to share with you is the course design, the CVC resources. This is where you're going to find the archived webinars. So when you go to that web page and click the calendar of events, this is the part that's not entirely intuitive. When you click calendar of events, it has a little sentence here telling you that if you missed an event or you want to watch the recording again, you can go to our YouTube channel and find in our webinars playlist, you'll find the archived recordings. So again, that's from the CVC resources page, and then you're going to click the events calendar link, and that will take you to where this is. It's a little bit hidden, but that's just the way it is. So, and I said I would share with you a link to course design resources, which is that public Canvas shell that has all of those examples and things about the rubric elements that I was sharing with you. When you go there, you'll see it follows the rubric structure. And so you can just click into the one that you want to read a little bit more about and find out about it. And I'll put this in the chat.
Oh, I did.
Cheryl beat me to it. Excellent. And then here what I have, I made a bit.ly one because the other one is such a long gobbledygook for Canvas. But if you go to the bit.ly one, you just want to make sure it is case sensitive. So you'd want to capitalize the OEI and the C and the D on course design, but that will work as well. And then I always just offer the tip. Canvas guides are fabulous. I find them extremely useful. They have the table of contents right in the Canvas guide area, but I always find that a little cumbersome to look through. So the tip I usually offer is to just Google Canvas LMS and then whatever topic. So maybe it's Canvas LMS plus setting up groups. And usually in the search results, the top result or two is going to be the very guide that you want to access. So that might be a shortcut for you to use. Okay, let's share. I have a question for you. What is one way that you promote instructor-initiated interaction in your course? So we'll get to student in a minute, but first I want to just ask, what are ways that you like to interact with your students so that you're creating that sense of connection? And you can either put it in chat, or if you want to unmute and say a little bit, raise your hand in Canvas and I will unmute you. And while you're thinking, I'm going to take a sip of water. I've been talking a lot.
Should have the raise hand function in the participants window.
Oh, yes, thank you. So thank you, Sean. So if you click the participants option in your Zoom menu, it will then give you the raise hand function. Okay, we've got one. And so, Laura, I'm going to unmute you and share your idea.
Hi, everyone. I've been doing a Zoom meeting, since I have to do 5.5 hours of office hours anyways, and it does count for office hours, as I've been told. So I'll do just a 1 hour Zoom meeting. I'm an art teacher, and I do a group crit. I download their images, and I create a PDF file, so then I can show them so they can see what each artist is doing, so they can see each other's work. And so we do a crit, and they give a little feedback. I do give them a breakout session so they can chit chat a little bit. Then I introduce the next topic, and I really don't do any demos, even though I'm an art teacher. I don't really know if students really want to that, but that's another thing I could be doing is showing demos. But
Yeah, so making use of that synchronous way of connecting and being present.
well,
and
yeah, then
on
you have to
Zoom. Yeah.
record it. You have to record
Yeah.
it so it's available for the asynchronous.
Yeah. Any other, thank you very much for sharing that. Any other ideas, either in chat or, okay, yeah, Claire, I'm so glad you mentioned that. The message students who, if you're not familiar with it in the speed grader, it's one of the options on an assignment. It will, Canvas allows you to message students who, and then it gives you, so students who got a certain percentage or haven't turned it in yet, or whatever the criteria, you can send them all and it sends them an individual message. So it's just a nice way to sort of give them a friendly nudge. How can I help kind of thing if they haven't turned in an assignment or whatever. And so weekly discussion post. And so Jean is saying students weren't participating. And so she set up the topic pertaining to that week's class, and it felt more relevant and it got more participation going. And Royce is saying Zoom is helpful. Yes, it really can be with that, making yourself available either just on an ad hoc basis or, as Mahara was sharing, a more structured way of connecting with them. Carol sends a pre-semester announcement telling them how she's going to participate in the discussions. You use embedded rubrics. You send announcements regularly, and the message students who. Yeah, excellent. Let me see if I'm missing any. Sylvia, who I know loves data, and I'm not a data fan, but I know data is valuable. She's also saying you can message students from the new analytics area in Canvas, which they've just added. Okay, written assignment, peer reviews. I know a lot of people don't do peer review, but it can be really nice to create that sense of back and forth and getting them to know each other. Another thing you can do in Canvas that I don't see people doing as often as I wish they would, in quiz questions, you can customize the feedback to an individual answer. So you're able, if a student gets a particular wrong answer, you can customize the response to that, saying, and I'll just make this up, oh, not quite, I recommend you go back and read this portion of the text, or go back and look at this video to find out what the right answer is, or provide them with a resource or whatever it is. So it's another way for the instructor to initiate meaningful interaction without having it to be individual on. You can set it up in the quiz, and then whenever a student gets that particular wrong answer, you've made that resource of, or recommendation available to them. Any other that I am missing before we go on to the next question? Okay, Carol, let me read. Create community early in the class, really important. And so you offer 3 extra credit announcements with questions like, what are you doing? Good, that's a perfect self-assessment question, which we're gonna get to next week's seminar. And the prompts, you get that sounds like a great idea. And have students create videos and give feedbacks to others. Yep. So now I wanna move on and ask you, and some of you have already responded, so we'll see if you've got other ideas. What's one way you promote student-to-student interaction? So not you to student, but how are you creating that sense of community and student-to-student interaction in your class? Use peer review function or discussion type peer review. Yeah, the peer review function, you definitely have to be pretty familiar with it so that you can provide the needed instructions. Unfortunately, it's not as intuitive as it would be nice for it to be, but once you learn it, it can be really valuable. So Carolyn is offering the student lounge discussion and peer reviews. Carolyn Para is saying she uses Flipgrid for kind of elevator speeches, which sounds really fun. Breakout rooms in Zoom can be a way to create that student-to-student interaction. And yeah, Flipgrid, and Teresa's saying in her Spanish, she's been able to use Flipgrid with really good results. Peer review and feedback on discussions. They're zipping by, I can't read them all, sorry. Yeah, having those weekly discussions with the peer, the replies. And Marie-Thèse, group projects. I really think group projects is an underutilized thing. And I put that resource in there, which hopefully will give you some ideas. One of the things that's important to keep in mind if you're doing group projects is to be really clear on both the directions of what it is they're actually needing to produce and participation levels, so that you don't get those students that, I won't use the word slackers, the ones who are less participatory than we would like them to be. It's really clear up front, here's what I want you to be doing. Okay, I know I'm missing some. So Michelle is saying instructor to student interaction, and yes, we will let you, even though you say you were slow. You start your course with a getting to know you survey, and Michelle has excellent examples of that in, I can't remember which of your webinars, but in one of yours, I think your humanizing webinar. So if you go to our webinar playlist and you come across Michelle's humanizing webinar, definitely watch it. But she has a getting to know you survey that gives her really important information about the students. And then she's able to respond to them with feedback that actually is relevant to what she has learned about that student. So maybe they're struggling with being unsheltered, or maybe they just lost their job, or, kind of things that really help you monitor and know who are the students that I want to be sure to keep an eye on, and what are things that I can connect with around with that particular student to guide your interactions. Okay, these are coming in fast and furious, way too many for me to go over every one of them. And Michelle actually shared her resource there in chat. Okay, I'm feeling talked out. We've had lots of good ideas. I want to find out if there's any last questions or suggestions. You can either use the raise hand or put it in chat before we close for the day. You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. Anything else, a burning question or an idea you just want to be sure to share? All right. Well, I've had a great time. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. The CVC-OEI resources is where you're going to find the event calendar to get the webinar recording. And hopefully you were able to open up all the various web link pages we've shared with you, so you can go peruse them after the call today. Thanks so much for being with us, and hopefully you'll have a chance to join us for next week and section D on the following week. All right, bye everyone.